This is the second of our speaker series. I hope you guys enjoyed the last one, and today we have a special guest, Jennifer. Jennifer Wang is the Vice President of Customer Success at Vectra. She's been at Vectra building and leading their customer-facing teams, and she has a long career of experience building expertise, building customer-facing teams for enterprise and cybersecurity software systems. She was most recently at Agari as the Vice President of Customer Success, where she handled most of the post-sale functions. And then prior to that, she spent about 11 years at Proofpoint in customer success, professional services, sales and engineering, and took it all the way from startup to post-IPO. And she started her career actually in professional services at Netscape. So,
you guys remember that?
Yeah, back in the day. She holds a bachelor's degree in music theory. And cognition.
Oh, I put that on there because it gives it a little bit more credibility if I had a minor in music cognition.
Yeah. Okay, from
it's true.
From Northwestern University. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that introduction. And so my agenda, I wanted to start with about me. That's my daughter up there. This picture is 2014, 2015 up there. This is their birthday party. And that's Mark's son right there, Emrys. So how do we know each other? Our kids went to gymnastics together. And they also now go to school together. So I told my daughter, Elise, this morning that I was going to see Emrys' dad. And she said, I'm going to tell Emrys. So I don't know whether you told him that I was going to be here today. But I'm thrilled to be here. Mark came to talk to, asked me to talk about customer success. And so I'm happy to do that. And one of the things that might help me is if we could just quickly go around and tell me your name and what your role is at the company. That would just be really helpful. Let me do that.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Fadi. I work in sales engineering.
Sales engineer.
Hi, I'm Manjit. I'm an engineer.
Okay.
I'm Andrew. I am in software engineering.
And video.
And video.
And audio guy.
Okay.
I'm Matt, and I'm in growth.
Growth. Okay.
I'm Leandra, and I'm people operations and just operations in general.
We'll go around in the back and then kind of weave in, I think, right back here.
My name is Sherry. I'm a business administrator here. Yeah.
Matt, customer success.
Hello.
Jared, data engineering.
Okay.
John, I tell Mark what we can and can't do. Product-wise.
Product.
And Lily from the data scientist.
And then up here.
Diana, I'm in growth, but I guess functionally it's sales, operations, some finance nowadays.
I'm Emily. I'm a solutions architect on growth. Everything with the customer journey.
Hi, I'm on data science and engineering.
Okay.
I'm Thomas, sales and marketing.
Super, great. So what I thought we would cover today is I wanted to give you a little bit of context about Vectra. It's cybersecurity. It's a different kind of company, but I think you're going to see a lot of, from what I understand of this company, some similarities. Talk about what is customer success from my perspective, a little bit of customer success 101, and then this thing called the customer journey, which I think is super important. And then I'll just leave with a couple of thoughts that I had talking to the board. So I joined Vectra in July, so pretty recent. There was no such thing as a customer success department at Vectra when I joined. Now, the VP of sales there is a longtime colleague. He and I worked together at Proofpoint for a really long time. So, as any of you may know, you start ending up making connections in your career. And so he asked me to come over, and that's why I did. And starting from no people in a customer success department to where I am now, so it's probably about 4 or 5 months on the job now. I have I've got 2 people hired, So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 basically on the team now. So really building that. And let me start with talking a little bit about what Vectra is. And we start with, this is kind of a tagline, right? Applying AI to automate threat detection and empower threat hunting. So we're cybersecurity. We take an AI-based approach to building a tool, a detection tool, to find the bad guys inside the network. Now, this is a little bit of our sales pitch, and the reason that I do this is that, and I talk about this, is customer success is all about, like, these customers are buying the product, right? So they have to believe in the story. And so in our case, our story is that right now, enterprises are really blind to attempts, to attacks, despite the massive investment. So if you look at the way that a phase goes with any kind of breach, it's all over the news. So the Marriott breach, other types of attacks. There's a prevention phase where we're trying to keep the bad guys out. There's under the assumption that, well, they get in. There's an active phase. And right now, it takes over 100 days to actually find attackers. So on average, the bad guys are in your network, in an enterprise network, for that long before anybody finds them. So that's the active phase. And then there's the cleanup. So once you find somebody, once you find an attacker, you've got to do a massive amount of cleaning up. So this is the segment of where we sit as Vectra, and these are our customers. So our users of our product are security operations center analysts. So they're analysts, the SOC. You guys heard of the SOCs? It's that's what we call it, SOC. So the SOC. So all these big companies have cybersecurity departments whose job is to look for bad guys and monitor. So our product is a detection product, fundamentally. So we tap into networks, we look for attacker behavior. And we think we take a different approach because we're focusing on the behaviors of attackers. And in our company, we have data scientists, but we also have security researchers. So security researchers, many of them used to be former analysts, or even just, we've got a lot of military-based types of folks that are from intelligence that go looking for cyber criminals, or even might have in the day actually engaged in some attacking. Thank you so much. Why do I talk about this? Because those are the people that buy our product, and those are the people that use our product. Okay. I won't go through the details, but this is the workflow of an individual user who's looking for an attacker. Okay. They analyze it, they figure it out, they have to do some investigation, they have to do some root cause analysis, and you can imagine what it's like. If you're like you have a clue that there's some funny business going on in your network, what do you have to do? Okay. So there are people that are doing this, and this is fun, and I'm showing this just because I think it's actually pretty cool. Which is, what does an attacker do? So an attacker is comes in. Think about it. A phishing attack comes in. A human clicks. Now there's some malware. But it's on a person's desktop. That thing is trying to. Now we have command and control. Now it's going to try to do some lateral movement to try to find something to either steal or to destroy, and try to acquire data. They exfiltrate. So these are the various behaviors that our data scientists and security researchers are analyzing to identify algorithms to detect. And then we bubble it up into a dashboard with quadrants of what are the hosts that are most critical to look at, and we call these detections or alerts. So an analyst will look at this dashboard, they'll be using it, they'll have to investigate this. So we need to make sure that the interface is beautiful to use, has a great experience, because we know that our users are going to be in this day in, day out. can't be too noisy, but it also needs to be effective. Right. Okay. Any questions? It's kind of cool stuff, right? Okay, so let's talk about what is customer success. Let's switch gears. So there's a lot of different explanations for what it is, and these words are used in a lot of places. It's a mindset, it's a department, it's a business imperative for SaaS companies, and actually I'll expand that to subscription-based companies, particularly for revenue. And then it's also a maturing discipline, so it hasn't been around for that long. When I started in Proofpoint, I was like 2004, I started as a sales engineer. We felt that we had a very different way of approaching both doing business and financially, as well as having this kind of customer-centric mindset. And that was back in the day when more and more software was being sold on a subscription model. And then now these days, it's this subscription economy. This is one of the things I always ask everybody to think about. So think about in your personal life, pick a product that you pay for on a subscription basis. Just think about that right now. So pick it, Netflix. That's pretty common. Amazon Prime, actually. Any of those. Okay, and you just think about, like, why do you renew? Why do you renew that product? Because I'm just going to pick somebody. Somebody tell me the product and why you renew it.
It's the value.
Yeah. So what did you pick?
Oh, my gym membership.
Okay. It gives you value. You think you get a lot of value out of it. What would make you not renew?
If they took away the things that gave me value.
Okay. like
specific machines.
Specific machines.
Yeah.
Maybe the hours they're open.
Yes.
The convenience,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Okay. So, but this is when I say it's a maturing discipline, we weren't using the words customer success in 2004, 2005. And so I was running professional services, and then I had the technical account management that I was running. And so I think in about 2011, I pitched to my CEO, like, hey, we should do this thing called customer success. Let's hire a couple of folks to be customer success managers. I've been reading about this. And so, but from then, it's been really exploding, and it is a hot market and a hot discipline. And also more and more in the investor community, this has become back to that business imperative. So why does customer success matter? It improves the renewal process. That thing that judgment that you had to go through, maybe on an annual basis, because if it's like a gym membership, maybe it's annual or maybe it's monthly. If it's monthly, you're going through that decision process every month. Should I renew? Right? So it improves the renewal process. Customer success defined as kind of proactively making sure that there's value. It reduces churn. Does everybody understand the word churn? What we mean? Churn means like you lose a customer. So sometimes I use the word churn in two ways. One is lost customer. So I've churned a logo. I'll call it like that. Or I've churned dollars. So when I think about the value of a customer, I think about their annual recurring revenue in the subscription economy. So let's say I have an annual recurring revenue of $100,000. They've signed a contract for $100,000 that's going to be renewable. So that's the available to renew amount in a year, and that's up for renewal. So your gym membership is probably like, I don't know, $80 or something a month. So that's like the monthly recurring revenue. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less, And the churn is if you aren't able to secure that, it's less. Then that's churn dollars. And then finally, it drives revenue. So it drives revenue because one of the key metrics that we think about and investors think about is CAC, the cost to acquire a customer. You guys measure that here? You think about it? Okay.
We try.
Try. Right? So it's expensive to get a new customer. Now, it should cost less to keep that customer. Okay? So, for example, this is an illustration of that. Let's say the cost to acquire $100 of revenue. In this example, there's all this cost. There's marketing, there's sales, there's overhead, and so you're going to have a CAC, and you lose money, right, for the first year because it costs you $110 to acquire the customer and to get $100 of revenue. But let's say in the second year, it only costs you $15 to do care and feeding and upkeep. Then your revenue is much higher, right? So as you acquire more customers, and so at a company Vectra size, for example, we have about 250 customers. We have about 25 million in annual recurring revenue. So my book of business that I have to keep happy is 25 million, right? And that is, and then we're going to renew that. That's more than the amount of new business that we're bringing in at this point, right? So that under management, then you suddenly start thinking, well, a dollar is a dollar, and this customer base it is cheaper to keep these customers than to acquire new ones. And we still have to acquire new ones, right? Because as you can see, another illustration of this, of the impact of a very low churn rate, let's say 5% versus 20% churn on an annual basis, in terms of what your growth rate is. You can keep customers happy and maintain a very low churn rate. Your growth rate is just going to be much higher, and companies are their valuation as they're evaluated by investors. This is a key metric. Okay, so let's talk about. So that's like the money part, right? The business part. And another part of the business part is this model. You might have heard, land and expand, land and adopt, expand, renew. You want to, so once you have a customer and they're happy, then maybe they'll buy more either different product or more licenses of the same one. In your situation, I would imagine, like if you have a happy customer, then maybe another building or some like another deployment. That's the case for us. So we might go into a customer and only do part of their network, right? So we sell based on the number of hosts that we cover, so part of their network, and we might expand. Or we might be able to sell them another product, a second product in our portfolio. And one of the key drivers from a business standpoint is all businesses have to find a way to be able to expand. So whether that's expand horizontally in terms of more licenses of something, or build other product that improves, that means you have more to sell to a customer. So this is like the kind of a perspective of like the customer. It's not really the customer journey. This is our journey, like the supplier's journey. And you might map it to some roles. You might have an account manager. You have a customer success manager whose job is to get to ensure adoption. And this is certainly reasonable. You might have a renewal specialist that you split out when the time is right. So for Vectra, we don't have that. Our sales team, once they sell a customer, they continue to be responsible for that customer. There's not like a separate team. And then you might have some breakout into different teams that have this kind of expansion type of thing. So that's kind of the makeup and an evolution of a company as it matures, as it gains more customers, how teams might end up getting broken out. But that's the supplier perspective. That's not the customer's perspective. So the supplier's perspective is always thinking, where our perspective, how can I get more money, right? How can I keep more money? How can I get more money? But, the customer is thinking, how am I getting the most value? How am I getting the most value? And so you can think of it as kind of there's two sides to the same coin, right? So land, adopt, expand, renew. From the customer's perspective, what are they going to do? They're going to plan, implement, monitor, and optimize. This is sort of a general, generic kind of map of faces, so to speak. But the goal is the business outcomes. And when I'm building my department in customer success, they're conscious of revenue, but I'm tasking each individual to be thinking about the business outcomes of their customers. So we want to build value. That is the reason that customer success, the department, exists. Now, as the VP of customer success, my job, I have a revenue responsibility to maximize the lifetime value in terms of dollars that I'm going to get out of my customers, right? So kind of, I'm not saying that we don't think about revenue, but as individuals, their main driver and focus is cultivating this business outcomes and the business value. So that's very much why I emphasize kind of what is customer success. There's the mindset element to it. Okay, so a lot of times I give these pitches, and one of the things that's important to me is to make sure I evangelize customer success to my own company, because they didn't have it before. And what does it mean? Yeah, so we actually have as one of our core tenets, like, one of our values, company values, is customers first. But what exactly does that mean to each person? I think it's important for each person at the company to think about what is it that I do today that actually does impact that. What does that mean? Because otherwise it's just a little bit of vapor talk. And so under the premise that happy customers renew and buy more, right? So a happy customer is going to renew their gym membership because they've got the machines and the flexibility and the hours and all the things. And maybe they might buy more. Maybe they'll decide to buy a 10-pack to a consultation for a personal trainer or something like that, right? Whatever happy means, happy, satisfied. I'm using this word happy. It's kind of not perfect, but I think it gets the point across. Here's a definition, if you want to put words to it, that is attributed to a person named Lincoln Murphy. He's an evangelist in customer success. He goes on the talk track in many places. You'll see him. So when customers achieve their desired outcomes through the interactions with our company, okay, it's there's definitely a product part to that, but it's all kinds of interactions. So it might be the kind of support they get. It might be if they're easy to do business with. It might be if they feel that this is a partnership that's ethical, like all of those kinds of things. And when I think about our customers at Vectra, they're trying to hunt for threats. So I want to be a partner to them so that they can get their desired outcome, which is to keep their company safe, find threats, and squash them, right? And then there's this concept of the customer journey. I really think of people in customer success as actually I use the gym analogy a lot. I really feel like they're the personal trainer to our customer, right? So they're a shepherd to help our customer move through the customer journey. Things like onboard quickly, like you don't want to spend ages and ages in deployment. Get time to value quickly, rapid time to value. Easy, minimal level of effort, an amazing experience, and you want the thing to work, right? You want the product. If you buy a product, you want it to work. So I think about those kinds of things through the customer journey. And then fundamentally, it's cultivate a customer that renews, buys more, and even further than that, renews, buys more, but advocates for us. Because if you turn your customers into promoters, and I've heard like this net promoter score thing, promoters and super users, they're going to help sell more for you, right? There'll be references, they'll talk, etc. So there's a huge element to my my plan for next year that talks about if we have these happy customers, how do we actually keep them happy but also use them as an additional element in our growth strategies. Okay, let's talk about the customer journey. I've got a few examples here from my past lives. So the first one is that I worked for a little time, for a while at First Data and they're financial. They're in actually credit card processing. But we had a product. It was an analytics product for small businesses. So you guys think like the pizza shop. They want to have some analytics into like how many pizzas they're selling. Is pepperoni better than cheese? Is lunch better than dinner? Those kinds of things. And so we had a dashboard. That was our product. And so it was a very consumer-based product. And I learned a lot because most of my career has been in all this enterprise software. But then I pivoted and I spent a couple of years in this kind of entirely different space with non-technical people. And so I mapped out what I thought the journey was. And so we had a free trial. So there's all these things in green. There's like awareness, acquisition. If they started using us via email, they downloaded the app. That was awesome. Then we had a free trial, and then we had this conversion, right? So we had a conversion to if they went from they converted from the free trial to paid, and then keep going, right? And so this is what we mapped as the customer journey. And because this was a fairly new product and we had limited resources, I decided, okay, these are the there was like 9 of these here. These are the 4 places that we're going to focus in 2016, and I had another map for 2017 where we said, okay, now we feel like we've made a difference there, and now we're going to focus in some others. So this is an example of how you might do a customer journey. This is very supplier-centric, by the way. This isn't really customer focused. If I was going to critique this map. So this is another version of it. Again, I feel like it is pretty supplier-focused. And then I worked at Proofpoint for a long time. So Proofpoint does email security, so enterprise anti-spam, antivirus, keep the bad stuff out of your email box. And what we did is that let me just go to this one. We had a pre-sales POC. You guys probably do that here, right? You have a POC, right? Paid POCs. Paid POCs, okay. So you had a pre-sales POC, and then you might decide a contract, you have an actual implementation, and then I felt like there was this production. And so what I tried to do is map the people, the touch points, because we had different teams. And it was complicated because we did these POCs free of charge. So there was a lot of technical work going on, and this is email. We're talking about like mission critical. If it screws up, we're in trouble, right? It's all bad news for everybody. So we had to have a support team that was really supporting them. And then we had this weird thing where how do you roll from pre-sales to post-sales? Is it just a mind switch? And most people thought, oh, well, we're all installed. But the reality is that you think short-term in pre-sales because your goal as a team is to get them to buy. And then once they've bought, your goals are different. Your goals need to be keep this customer for life, plan for the long term, do the right thing in terms of the architecture, probably reconvince a team who didn't buy it but now have to support it that they're going to love this product. And I really do mean love, right? There can be emotion, and I think there should be emotion in enterprise. And so what I did when we analyzed this, and this is, remember back in the day when there wasn't really customer success, and I was kind of doing this on my own, doing a bunch of research, is to say, well, if we have these, let's break it down into pre-sales, implementation, production, and then we've got this renewal, and there are risks that go along. So we had this big transition risk from when, so the way it works in email is that you have to install this and then you cut over so that, okay, before then the email wasn't being filtered, now it is. Like tons of things could go wrong. And so that was really important. That was a very, a moment of truth in that. And so we had to make sure that we had a program specifically to address that point. And then there was also this renewal risk. If before the renewal came up, this was a 1, 2, or 3 year deal. Maybe they weren't happy, but we didn't know. So we better go do a health check. So we implemented a few programs. Now keep in mind also, I probably didn't have enough people. I definitely didn't have enough people, so I couldn't make this high touch calls to every single customer. We had 2,000 customers, representing a lot of ARR, to make some decisions about how to do that. So a lot of element of customer success in my job, especially as the VP, is thinking about the programs or thinking about the system and the platform, combination of technology as well as people, and making some decisions about, that's acceptable loss or that's not. The big, do I spend my resource on the 500K ARR customer or the 20K ARR customer? So on first glance, you might say, oh, of course. But what if half of your revenue is from 320K customers? You can't just say, oh, we're going to ignore them because then they're all going to churn. So you have to think of it as, in different kinds of strategies, and then you end up, what you end up doing is tiering your customers, making some decisions about what program you're going to apply to each kind of segment of your customers. Here's another example. Agari was also similar. It was in email security. And so you don't have to worry about the product itself, but you can see that some of the commonalities was that there's this onboarding and adoption and maturity phase. The same thing that I showed you on the proof point side. So that pattern seems to have served me pretty well. So when I came to Vectra, I was like, okay, let me might as well start with some things that I feel like are right. So, and then what I really tried to do when I was mapping out this customer journey is, what is the initial value milestone? When can we go back to the customer and say, you have received value, but I want that to be short as possible. I don't want it to be like you have to wait for 9 months before you get value. Like, I need value as soon as possible, okay? So, this is another product. So we had 2 products at Agari. One was called Customer Protect, the other was Enterprise Protect. Just don't worry about what they do. But the thing is that we had to define these initial value, mid-value, and full value milestones. Okay. So now that I'm at Vectra, I'd done this a few times, and I came to Vectra in July. Did some analysis. First, I did make sure I understood the product, and I just talked to customers and kind of understood what it is that they're doing. And so my customers are those analysts, those people that are looking at that dashboard and they're trying to fight the good fight and find cyber attackers. But they can't be noisy. It can't have like gobs and gobs of alerts that they have to go research and it turns out it's nothing. Right? That's a real turnoff. So, what is it that we're trying to do? And then also, meanwhile, I was introducing customer success to this company that hadn't had it before. And it's not that there's resistance, it's just that there's education, right? You know, like what is it that we're trying to do? How do we not think just revenue minded? And so the first thing I had to do was like, we're not here. Our purpose isn't to make money. Our purpose isn't to secure renewals. That's not. We will secure renewals, but that's not what our purpose is. Okay, well, what is our purpose? So I spent some time, and I think it's actually important for what I would highly recommend that you do too, is to craft a purpose statement. You need to craft a purpose statement of what are you trying to do in customer success. If you have customer success in your title, what is your purpose in life? You know, in the context of the company. And so what we decided and we crafted is a purpose statement for Vectra not just the generic to deliver value, which I do think is true. Like, I think the purpose is to deliver value. And I said that to my husband, Nick. Mark knows Nick, and he laughed because deliver value. That just sounds so blah. He said, "It's like, okay, well, thank you for the feedback." And so to merely make it hit home, this is what we came up with to empower our customers. Now, this is important, both their teams, so the organization, as well as the individual, the human in the team, to be the most effective and efficient threat hunters possible. So another thing about cybersecurity and that industry, it's hot market. The unemployment rate is like 0 for good cybersecurity analysts. And if you're good, you're not going to stay at a job very long. You're going to go find another one that pays more money. So there was turnover all of the time in these security operations centers, is what we found with our customers. So in order for us to continue to maintain value, we basically have to kind of resell and retrain every 6 months because people are changing all over the place. If we do, but what I'm saying is that if we do a great job at training and empowering that individual and helping that person in their career, they're going to go to the next company and think about Vectra and evangelize it, and they may bring Vectra to that company. And we also really believe that we have a different approach that's kind of next generation to how you attack this problem. And so we are thinking about how do we sort of spread the word, how do we create a movement with a groundswell with people. So that's really important to our strategic direction as a company. And what I realized is if we can sort of articulate that purpose to each of our customer, the team members in customer success, that is something that helps drive what you're doing every day. And it's a long game. So it's again, I think very much akin to that personal trainer kind of analogy that if we're a coach and a guide and this person becomes the best threat hunter possible using our product, then we will have done our job right. And good things happen when people are happy, when they feel that they've learned something. They buy more. They actually, it turns out they do. They'll renew. Okay, and so we ended up building out a journey that looks like this. Oops. Which is plan, implement, train, and optimize. So I mentioned that turnover thing that happened all the time. So I really emphasize this training. Like, we gotta always train. We've got to be doing continuous training because people are leaving, and we need to keep doing that. So we embedded it as part of our customer journey. So we need to plan. Outcomes engineering is the process of explicitly talking with your customer and mutually agreeing what your goals are, and then implementation, training, and optimize it. And I've used Vectra Team here because we use everybody. It's not just the customer success managers who didn't even exist because they weren't hired yet. It's everybody in the company. And then also the power of a customer community. We have a strong community of customers that love our product, and I want to tap into that and let them help support other people, help sell the product. So that's kind of our journey that we have been building. And so just a couple of closing thoughts. So I started in July. I spent kind of a long time sort of baking this in. And then I had my first board meeting, I guess it was in October. So I wanted to tell them what I was up to. And so these are the themes that I told them about. That I was focused on building out a customer journey map, which I think that everybody needs to do. And I would highly encourage you to do that with the value points and focusing on the customer's point of view. And then it takes a lot to spend time to define our purpose, evangelize, and then build alignment internally. These things take time, but if you can have the entire company together, understanding what their individual interaction does to impact the customer journey and customer success, then that's going to be important. And then wanted to keep clear that the one of the most important things in customer success you'll end up seeing is there's a real close relationship with operations, because there's just like a lot of it's data-based, data-driven, and what you're going to end up wanting a mature organization, which Vectra does not have yet, because we're still growing with customer success, is a way to measure the customer health, whatever that means. So you have to define what that is. So you want to be able to systematically, like a goal would be to know the lay of the land of all of my customers. So what is healthy? Healthy is probably, for us, is probably defined as they're using it, like they're logging in every day. Technically, they don't have like a lot of issues, and that they're mature in the processes that they use to try to find threats. So that would be what healthy is for us, I think. We haven't actually spent the time yet to fully define that, and then you want to measure it. And so there's like a lot of tooling and metrics that you want to get from that. Much of the software that's available talks about things like usage of your product, and I think for your situation that might be kind of difficult, because I mean, like, using your product, like the people use your product, right? Because they go and like I don't know, they use your product, right? So you'd have to think about what is the definition of a healthy customer adoption, and systematically measure it, because then you can know if their scale of red, yellow, green. A lot of times people use. Then on the red customers, what do you need to do to make sure that to try to move from your reds to yellow and your yellows to green? So that would be kind of an approach, a systematic approach in customer success. So I'll leave you with just thinking about that was where I am in my journey, and it is a journey. There's like a lot of thoughts here, but I think the last thing to think about is just customer journey, getting value, and then how do you build and drive a purpose statement for your organization, and thinking about what your goals and objectives are. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions for Jennifer?
Happy to chat about anything. I've never taken a computer science course in my life. That would be
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you mentioned that there are, you've been at all these different companies, and then you describe these customer journeys. I'm curious about two things. Outside of the customer journey differences between these companies, which I saw a lot of parallels and similarities, were there differences in how customer success was implemented?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So a lot of that has to be, I would say the first thing is to think about customer support. Are you using customer success as customer support? And you can think of, typically that's talked about as proactive versus reactive. So when I was at Agari, I also had support recorded into me. And I don't like to think about it as, I don't want people to think support is just like this reactive thing. Yes, they do have to react. I think of support as responsive. We are here to respond to whatever inquiry, issue, problem, whatever that you have. So that's what customer support should be. And there's a couple, the age-old thing in the sort of debate, if they take any kind of these polls, is where does customer success lie? Is it number one in sales? Is it two, like a direct to the CEO, like a seat at the exec table? 3, is it somewhere else maybe even under engineering, because it's thought about as part of support. So that's where. So when I was at Proofpoint, I was under sales, and when I was at First Data, it was a little bit different, but I was kind of in a liaison, more really kind of a support-ish type of function. And then at Agari, but this is from a personal career perspective, I would only choose companies from then on out that it was reporting to the CEO as an actual department. Because the differences that you'll see from an implementation standpoint are a lot of it has to do with what the leadership thinks of what you're doing. And then most of it, and then the next question will be around who owns the renewals. Is it a separate team or is it the same team as the new business team?
What would be some of the trade-offs between, like, say, a separate team owning it versus customer success?
Yeah, so part of it has to do with whether you feel like you can create a commissions schedule that meets the needs of your business, right? So that are you comping on double comping or not? The advantage in that most companies that I've been with, they start with the sales rep owns everything, right? And then we'll decide whether to split it out. I think that the sales reps owning everything is good from the sense of that the sales reps usually create this like long-term relationships, but you can also, it kind of depends on whether they're going to ignore their renewals because they're focused on new business, and part of that also has to do with the commissions structure that you put in place, right? So on the flip side, when I was at Proofpoint, then we did split out the renewals into a separate team. CFO really likes that because you don't have to pay as much. I mean, for renewal reps, typically the commissions are smaller, but sometimes you get into sort of territory kind of issues with there, especially if it's okay. So the renewal manager is responsible for the renewals, but what about expansion? Who gets expansion? Does it go back to the new business rep or does it go back to the renewal rep? And there's a skill set thing. So I think there's not, either can work, but it has to do with whether you can have the rules of engagement work. And when I was at Proofpoint, for example, we went through so many models. We did that, and then add-ons were either with the renewal reps and then different, and then a different team, and then we put it back, and because you just try all these things and see whether it works or not. And then customers can also get annoyed by getting passed from one person to another person to another person. So at Vectra, what I'm proposing is that we have the same sales rep is focused on there's no change. They own the renewal. They have to transact the renewals. They do new business and they do renewals. But I'm growing a team of customer success managers whose job is to do that nurture and care and feeding and be a partner to them. So that ends up being an account team that has the sales rep, the sales engineer, who's a technical engineer, customer success manager, and then actually I have a fourth person, which is an implementation engineer. So those two, the customer success manager and the implementation engineer, are both post-sales in my organization. The rep and the SC are in the sales organization, but they have to be a team together. So, and that works if you also have really good relationships between the executives. So the VP and a sales and VP of CS have to be, consistent. And then interestingly enough, so then some challenge can come into play if the head of customer success rolls into, let's say, the VP of sales, who may be more focused on new business than on the customer success side. So, there can, it really just kind of depends on the person and whether they can, how much they can sort of divide their time, I would say, and their mind share into thinking about both sides of the business. That's helpful.
Question. You mentioned that you can look at from an organization's perspective. You can look at it from a customer's perspective. or more from like a supplier perspective. I was just curious, like your take on what are some important KPIs to look at to keep track of, and whether you keep track of it, or you prefer to keep track of it, like, for example, you can track the number of new customers you get, or the number of new dollars you're getting each month.
Both.
When you look at it from
Have to look at both,
Both,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So like we can talk a lot about metrics, right? I spend a lot of time on metrics and in business operations, getting all of that data. So I spend a lot of time looking at the numbers of customers as well as the dollars. So when I came into Vectra, they were really only focused on dollars. And so, for example, one of the metrics that we had in place was there was an obligation for the account teams to always do QBRs, quarterly business reviews, with every customer. And the way that we would, they would display it on the dashboard was based on like dollars, dollar ARR of a customer. So, okay, so Susie's patch, she has, this number of like $1 million worth of ARR in her patch, and she's had QBR meetings with 800K. And I just thought that was weird, because like, how many customers have you have? How many meetings did you have? A customer is a customer is a customer from that perspective. So you kind of have to make sure that you look at both. And then what I would highly recommend is if you have if you get to a point, how many customers you guys have?
Roughly 40.
40. So you might not have to do that yet, but you're going to get to a point where you're going to think about segmentation of your customers. So, for us, our biggest paying customer pays us like $4 million ARR, and our smallest customer pays us $5,000 ARR. So they're very different. Yet that is still a customer that has to be cared for. So when I think about metrics, I think about both. I always think about both. Did you have any other specific question about the what we've been looking for?
No, I think that answers it. I'm just
Yeah.
more curious. Like, I guess, I don't know, in any industry in general, like, do companies more? I guess they're more focused on the revenue. They don't. Is this customer success thing kind of new in terms of their attracting customers, or are they mainly just focused on the dollars? I'm just curious.
It's both. And so what you'll do, like, there's a bunch of I don't think I have that slide here, but I had a slide on metrics. So the important, there's some buzzword metrics that you can look at, and which would be, so the annual recurring revenue is important. The quantity, typically people want to keep churn less than less than 10%. Okay, it is, and the flip side of that, you can call it, your renewal rate. The renewal rate. When I was at Proofpoint, we focused on the number, and then now I switched to revenue. But I like to look at both. So I always know the numbers as well as the ARR. The other thing is that everything is like an average. Also, the ASP, so that's another average selling price, which takes into account both, right? So our average selling price at Vectra is about 120K. About 2 years ago, it was more at the maybe 40K mark. What that means is that we've been going up market and selling to higher enterprises, which is actually much more lucrative when you think of the long game, because it is expensive and it is hard in enterprise sales to acquire that customer. But once you get that customer, then that graph that I showed you earlier about the in the out years 2 and 3 positive, much more lucrative. But you have to keep the customer and not let them churn.
Another question. You talked about from very early days of Proofpoint all the way through IPO. There's a lot of different models that happened and changed along the way. Were there any things that were pretty consistent, across the whole time period from when you started implementing customer success at Proofpoint all the way through? Was there?
Yeah, so the thing that was consistent was that we always had a customer focus, and that was from the top down. That was our CEO, and so because of the subscription model and knowing that, the other thing I would say is that when I built professional, I hired my first professional services engineer in 2005. That person is actually still working at Proofpoint, even though I left. And so that team, the fact that you had professional services to do that initial implementation, I think that stayed. You know, we created that, and that stayed throughout the entire thing. And the other thing that we had that was, I think, pretty unique at Proofpoint, and we don't have it, I haven't implemented it in any other company, is that we specifically had a team of pre-sales support engineers. So what are pre-sales support engineers? So they were, I used to always say they were the skill set of a support engineer with the mindset of a sales engineer. And they reported, I had two folks in that team just that reported it to me. So, because I was in the sales engineering side at the time at Proofpoint. And so the thing that was really good about that is that means that the sales and the SE, that technical organization was kind of self-sufficient and didn't have to rely as much on that. But that was a pretty unique thing at Proofpoint. So at Vectra, we have kind of much more of a one-team atmosphere. But those kinds of things, I think the thing that was consistent at Proofpoint through that entire time was our approach to making sure that the customer was successful and doing whatever we needed to. And another thing that was pretty specific about that company was this like swarm mentality. We even named it, like we had one of these offsites where we talked about it. It was like, you know, we have a behavior. Our company behaves like this. There's an issue, and then everybody swarms on it. You know, whoever's the right person. It doesn't matter what department they're in, but we'll get the right person for the job and swarm on it. And it was something to be really proud of. But the cautionary tale is that it's also, we shouldn't be swarming. Like after several years, once you swarm, you should figure out how to not do that anymore and kind of prevent those problems. So I think that the thing that stayed very consistent throughout the entire thing was kind of this approach to the customer is first. Not the customer is always right, but the customer is always first. Right.
What are your thoughts on like what the relationship between customer success and channel partners or distributors should be?
Yeah, so I think there needs to be a close relationship on the sales side with the channel partners and distributors, and then in many places. So, for example, at Proofpoint, we had a a sales engineer that was dedicated to the distributors and the channels to really help kind of program manage that. And then when I was at Agari, one of the things that I really we did was we kind of, if you think about partner success, then was it an offshoot of training and enablement, et cetera? But the question is, does that live in customer success or does that live in sales? And I think it can live in either. I'm agnostic to it, but it just more of a, I don't think there's an answer of like, oh, it should be in one department or the other. It can be in either. It just, to me, it depends on both bandwidth as well as the leader and what they want to do and how they want to approach it. When I was at Agari, I did not want to take on the role of partner success because it was purely a bandwidth concern around making sure that my primary goal, which was to ensure customer success, was going to be successful. So we decided at Agari that partner success component was going to be in the sales organization. And at Vectra, we have specific dedicated people for both alliances as well as our channel partners.
I have two questions actually.
Sure.
One maybe simple. On one of your slides, you mentioned maturity services. I'm not familiar with that. Is that end of life cycle type of thing?
No, so we have this philosophy that we think that we are really good experts on a company to build their security program. And so we're talking about maturity services are there really consulting services that my team can offer to you, like workshops, business consulting to make your program more mature. So that's where we're going on building out my professional services practice in cybersecurity.
You include that in ProServe, like?
Yeah, that's our. And that is a key differentiator of my program at Vectra, is to really say that, remember that purpose statement, to empower them to be the best threat hunters possible. So both the individual people, so that involves training, as well as the organizations. So can we help partner with you to mature your cybersecurity program? That's the premise. And so we're going to build service offerings that help do that.
And then my second question, unrelated, was how big of a have you used any customer success tools, or have you felt like you've been able to get everything you need out of sales services spreadsheets?
Yeah, not spreadsheets, no. Although I'm pretty good with those. Salesforce, you can get a lot out of Salesforce. I have, I bought Gainsight at Agari, and we were in the middle of deploying it and then I left the company. And then, so my opinion on tools is that the tool if you don't have your process down, the tool is going to make it worse, actually. Because you think you can rely on some tool that's going to give you all the answers. It's not going to. It's not going to. It's like you have to have your process understood and figured out before you implement the tool. And then, if I was doing it again right now, because we don't have a tool, we're using Salesforce, do you go with Gainsight, which is kind of an older product, and I would probably be more open to looking at some of the other ones like Strike Deck and Client Success, etc. But you might also just think about what are you really trying to achieve, and not just assume that by buying a tool, then magically some stuff's going to happen. It really kind of depends. Now that being said, I love Gainsight as a company. They have huge amounts of literature on their website, which I read all the time. I go to their conferences. I love their CEO, Nick Mehta. He's an amazing and inspiring leader. He's built a great company. So I follow Gainsight quite religiously, but ironically, I don't know if I'm going to procure their product. Yeah.
My question sort of tied to the question that Matt had, but it was about professional services. So does a professional, in all the different organizational paradigms that you've had, has professional services ever, do they live inside, are they one of the roles inside customer success, or is it some separate organization that gets contracted?
It's like 50-50. If I had another slide, like whenever you go to one of these conferences, they'll do a survey and say, where does professional services live? And you'll see, some of them are a separate organization, some of them customer success, blah, blah, blah. So when I was at Proofpoint, I ran professional services. Professional services rolled up into sales, okay? And then towards the end of my my tenure at Proofpoint, they moved professional services to go under the VP of client services, which had professional services and support. Okay, so model number 2. When I was at Agari, I took everything. Right, everything post sales was under me, and at Agari they didn't have support, so I had to create support because it was we called them the customer success engineers. They were doing support deployments, management, everything. And I was like, you can't have a single person. I need an offshoot of a technical team that's going to do support, that are going to be frontline support, hands-on, and then different to people who are relationship managers that are talking to CISO, the C-suite. It's not the same as the person who's taking the call that something's broken. And then at Vectra, I support roles into engineering right now because they're very tightly connected. And then I have professional services and customer success. So it's a mixed bag, and I think it depends on how important services is in your business. A friend of mine, Allison, if it's a very substantial part of your business based on what your product is, you might even have a separate professional services organization that's outside of customer success. And that was, my friend was at Host Analytics, and she was the VP of customer success. And then she did not have, then there was a professional services. But then what happened was that later on, they rolled professional services under her. So it can go, like professional services is also one of those, like, does it go under success? Does it go under sales? Is it its own thing? Sometimes it's really tied to product also, depending on what the use of it is for. Before I joined, our professional services was in the office of the CTO. So it really kind of depends. I think the one thing to think about, because for professional services, is in a product company, I have a very strong opinion that professional services is not here to be a revenue generator. So one thing I learned, and that's different from Proofpoint to what I'm doing at Vectra, is that at Proofpoint, we charged for the implementation. And so we put paid, and that was professional services. And then there's the value add on the consulting side. So those were all together. So at Vectra, what I'm doing is that I've split out onboarding and implementation. We don't charge extra for that. That's if you buy our product, you get deployed. You get somebody assigned to you. We'll make it work. But then professional services, very much so, is then these maturity services, this consulting, this ad hoc extra. So, and then the other thing I can do is keep the value of that quite high in terms of the hourly rate. So that's a difference that I've based on my analysis of what we need at the company.
What do you think some of the most important ingredients are for like a successful customer need or issue escalation path?
For an escalation path.
Yeah.
Responsiveness. So there's all the if you can create an impression that you are responsive, people want to know that you're responsive. This is kind of like how do you make customers happy? First of all, if you can solve their issue, best, but responsive. And it was funny. I being responsive, and taking them seriously and listening to them.
I'm thinking more internally.
Internally.
Yeah, internally, building out processes in which internal teams are responsive to technical issues. Like what are sort of have been the best practices that you've learned?
So are these issues
like
that
ticketing?
How issues that arise that a customer brings up? Yeah, so you have to have a ticketing system, and you have to have a process that's an escalation process and a path to engineering with SLAs. So that's, and then do you guys get tickets like all hours of the day? Is it 24/7 kind of thing, or is it?
We don't have a ticketing system.
You don't have a ticketing system. Okay, well that's problem number one.
Sort of why I asked the question.
Yeah, you gotta have a ticketing system. Zendesk is kind of like the small person, a small company de facto. Yeah, it's good. It works. You gotta have a ticketing system. Yeah. Jira, but you have the intake, and then internally, whatever ticketing system. What do you guys use for product development?
Tracker.
We use Pivotal Tracker, so
Okay.
we can create bugs and tickets through that, but it's a little bit more cumbersome process.
Okay. Jira.
We tried.
My husband just started at a new job and they didn't have a ticketing system, so he's installed Jira. So, Jira, you tried it, you didn't like it?
It didn't stick. We used Pivotal, we switched to Pivotal.
Okay. Yeah, but for customer facing, you've got to have a mechanism. So how do customers enter issues now?
Through intercom. Yeah, so we do use
Okay,
intercom
you
as
have
our
intercom.
primary customer interface through the software side. If there's any other issues, they come in through email.
Do they have does intercom have a concept of a ticket number or an issue number or something? Or is it
They track issues as threads, and then we can assign that to a Pivotal card. I mean, it's not like a
That
very
could work.
formalized system, but that's sort of what we're doing right now.
Okay, yeah, so that could work, and then if it comes in, so the difference is the channel of coming in from email, you just have to decide how does that get entered as a ticket. But I am very anal about tickets. Like, if you have an issue, it needs a ticket. It needs a ticket number. Like, it should not be an email thread that does not have an associated ticket. Like, if anybody's going to work on it, like, it needs to be documented as a ticket one way or another.
When your sales process involves people from different functions, so you mentioned sales, there's the sales engineer, whatever, customer success. What have you seen as the best practices of communication and handoffs and just making sure everyone knows when they need to be involved and who's still there?
Yeah, you need to religiously update Salesforce. So do you have an object in there that's so for example, like an opportunity, you have an opportunity, do you have a POC object, for example, in Salesforce? Yeah, like as an example, right? So that's one of the first things that I did when I looked at, when I both came into Agari as well as to Vectra, is that just get everybody in the habit of actually writing their notes in and document them in Salesforce. And there's a bunch of tools out there that can help, like, get people to just BCC the Salesforce email address. Like, that like any email that you can hook up your email to it. There's this thing called Clary. I mean, these are all tools that are out there. There's gobs of hundreds of SaaS products out there. But I just think it's like, you just put everything in Salesforce. And then we have I had that problem where, I come into Vectra and I can't tell if there's deployments, like where are these deployments? So create a deployment object, create the concept of a deployment object, and the process is that once we close an account, or once we're opening it, you have to have this checklist, and now there's this form that has to be filled out.
Mm-hmm.